So next we're going to talk about the structural factors, and we're going to expand on our understanding of what leads to poor health outcomes or diseases. So social structures, what are we talking about when we're talking about structural factors? Social structures are the policies, the economic systems, and other institutions, so judicial system, school, etc., that have produced and maintained modern social inequities, as well as health disparities, often along the lines of social categories such as race, class, gender, and sexuality. And when we look at the, this is from the World Health Organizations. So most of you are familiar with the social determinants of health, right? But the structural determinants of health are like the structural determinants of the social determinants of health. So that's even further upstream. And so what are the policies, right? What is the socioeconomic? Well, that's more of a social determinant of health, right? But it's the policy and the history, the institutions, everything that creates the social determinants of health, or everything that creates inequities and disparities within the social determinants of health, okay? Structural competency. Why are we even doing this? Well, the ACGME really has this newer goal for all residents. So this is something that is required as part of residency training for you to have an understanding of what structural competency is. And so that's what we're doing today. Structural competency is the capacity for health professionals to recognize and respond to health and illness as the downstream effects of broad social, political, and economic structures. Let's go back to our case. So we have the 13-year-old with asthma. She's had symptoms for a year, and she has been treated. And then her history includes obesity, school failure, untreated ADHD, smoke exposure, and inconsistent follow-up. So here's what you get with your standard medical history. But if we go back farther in life, so let's go back all the way. Parents grew up in South LA, met in high school. Dad was expelled. Mom drops out at 17 because she was pregnant. Parents sold marijuana to pay for food and medical care. Parents were arrested for using marijuana. No government assistance because guess what? If you have a drug-related conviction, then you don't get you get barred from government assistance sometimes. Mom works 2 to 3 jobs, which resulted in early daycare and poverty. And so we know that some of the risk factors that we saw were that she got RSV and frequent URIs. And so we can trace that back to early daycare, right? 11 years after being on the Section 8 list, they finally got a place to live. And it looks like the home was by a highway. It was very poorly maintained. And so, you know, talking to this family, and this was an actual person that I saw at CHLA, I saw them in the outpatient setting, and it was exactly like we talked about. They had only had asthma, like very, you know, within the last year. And that was associated with 3 hospitalizations. But, you know, and that's what stuck out to me. Like, why would a preteen teenager all of a sudden have such bad asthma that they needed to be hospitalized 3 times within the year, even though they were getting treated? And why after this hospitalization, after getting better so quickly, did they deteriorate? And so we started talking, and I asked Mom, like, what do you think it is? And it turns out that for the past year, the little girl's bedroom had been flooding with water because on the other side was a laundry facility and water had been coming in. The little girl's bedroom was on the first level of the apartment. The rest of the family stayed on the top level. And it wasn't just like a little leak. It was like 2 to 3 inches of water. The kids would come down, splash in it like a pool, but the little girl was like living in it. And it was a carpeted floor. So what would the landlord do? They would come in with the shop vac and shop vac it up, and then like, that's it. And because of course my first question, naively was, or like judgingly, was, did you tell the landlord? Of course they told the landlord. The landlord was not doing their job. And then, mold was growing in the carpet, up the wall, up the ceiling. And that's what was exacerbating this little girl's asthma. The good news to this is, because we had a great environmental determinant, we called the health department, because they are who regulates, landlords who are supposed to be providing a place of living that is habitable, and this is not habitable. So you can call the health department for like vermin, for this kind of stuff, for anything that just isn't acceptable living situation. And the health department got out there within that day. Actually, they had the landlord remediate it within a week, and I did not see this girl for months because she didn't need asthma treatment anymore. So this is like one of the only times where you can actually, cure asthma in a day. Anyways, let's go back to our case. Looking at the whole history of this, now we have some more, like we have the risk factors. So this is our standard medical history, right? And then we had maybe like a social environmental history that gave us some of the risk factors for asthma. But then going way back, we're asking more of an environmental and a life course history. We get more of this stuff. And so, of course, like, during that visit, I might have not asked this whole entire thing, but now that you know this about the case, what kind of structural or policy issues can you identify that maybe contributed to this issue? And the issue is uncontrolled asthma. And so go ahead and answer the poll, brainstorm, and see what you guys can come up with as a group, and go ahead and submit it. Make sure that you submit it under your name, and make sure that you submit it before going forward.